Hey, folks, it is January the 5th, 2021, and I hope you had a good Christmas break. Shh, hey, class, time's up. So, today we're going to go over chapter 98, which has to do with the rise of the university system. You might remember that before the break, we were going over the end of what we call late antiquity or the Middle Ages and the beginning of the Renaissance. In higher education is going to be one of the key characteristics of the Renaissance. And so the terms we have on the board are education before the university, Abelard, education in Italy, the university model and early degrees, and the faculties, which means the subjects. So make sure you read that chapter and all that good stuff. All right. Sir, now I only squared away a few images for us, so let's see what we got here. All right, so now your book's kind of generous when they talk about Charlemagne restarting or like founding education in Europe again after the fall of Rome. Really and truly, it kind of just amounted to he hired a few tutors, and the tutors would go around teaching like a handful of students here and there to basically be clerics or priests. So it was like extremely basic literacy. It was a lot of memorization. They taught them to read some Latin. As far as like arithmetic, we're talking about like basic addition and subtraction, right, Ariel?
Yes, sir.
And well, for them it was something, right? I mean, but the thing is, engineering, higher mathematics, you can say philosophy, or what we would consider to be the sciences and stuff. None of that. There wouldn't be like founded schools either. So you couldn't think of like a building. You could just think of like a guy who might have one or two books, and he's just going to go around kind of teaching. Now, Abelard, as your book mentions, he's going to kind of change this model a bit. It was still about the lecture. Your book's correct to say, Kelly, you can close it up. Your book's correct to say that it really was all about lecturing. This is before the printing press. And so how teachers worked back then, students weren't so much forced to go to a school and learn. Instead, how it was, often the students would be told by their parents to go find themselves a teacher. And so the students would together put their money together from their parents and hire a teacher. If they didn't like the teacher, the students could fire them. Yeah, back then the students got to pick like if you could, like imagine that if you could fire teachers, right? Wouldn't you like that? And so this happened, and this caused a lot of problems. It's actually, the thing is, though, firing teachers became so prevalent in England. There was a time where some of their universities closed down and students just fired all the teachers. So, but the thing is, though, you have to have a backup, because if you fire all your teachers, you still have to get, and you're wanting to have a nice job back home, and not have to work the fields. You still had to have that degree, so you got to find a place where you're going to go. So And so Abelard was known as being a good lecturer. And how was he a good lecturer? Well, you had to learn from other people who lectured to you. Sure, you did some reading, but not all the books were there. So you had to trust other people to tell you what were in those books. And early textbooks weren't textbooks the way you think of it. Early textbooks were basically like the lecture notes that the professor had. And when it was time for him to die, he gave his lecture notes to his son. And then his son took over his job as a professor. So the students didn't get to read it. Only the professor got to read it. They basically just handed them down generation after generation. And so Abelard had a very sharp, great memory. And he was a good lecturer, and he was able to talk to people and entertain them while teaching them. And so people flocked to them. And he's going to do this literally on the steps of Notre Dame, the cathedral that burned down in Paris. And people would just like come in crowds and listen to him talk. And eventually they pitched enough money in to build the University of Paris. And so that's how that's been kicked off. Now in Italy, it's going to be multifaceted. So like in Italy, like here's Irenaeus. And so Bologna is kind of like on the west side of northern Italy, if I remember right. And a lot of Italians, they're going to have like a birth of the university in that they're going to get a lot of refugees from Constantinople who are fleeing the Ottomans. And these people from Constantinople are going to teach the Italians Greek, and they're going to teach, and they're going to bring with them manuscripts from the days of the ancient Greeks. They're going to bring with them Homer, and they're going to bring with them like Plato, and all these other works, and they're going to teach the Italians, but also they're going to teach the Italians legal systems, and so like the Justinian Code, and which is going to be the basis for laws and government in Europe for a really long time, until the time of Napoleon, really. And then Napoleon's going to kind of squash that, come up with the Napoleonic Code later. And so Irenaeus was a very famous teacher who could teach legal theory. So you could think like some of the first really good law schools were coming up in Italy, and then they're going to spread throughout Europe. And so now he might not have looked so much like that. Like here is the University of Bologna at the time. So you see they're wearing their super fancy medieval dress. And so you got one guy kind of sleeping in class. Often, whenever they would go to these things, they would have to sit there like literally all day. And a lot of them didn't even have seating. They were expected to stand the whole time. So you're just there standing for hours. You might not have a place to write. So you're just kind of like holding your notes in your hand if you are trying to keep some. Though that was very expensive. But this was kind of like a rare occasion for somebody to neither be a peasant or a noble. You could be something in between, and it could since there were so few educated people. If you came out with an education, there's a lot of people willing to pay you because there's hardly anybody. Unlike today, where like degrees are a dime a dozen, so make sure you get the right degree if you're gonna get one. But so yeah, I mean, you could say that later on though, we're going to see something different happen. We're going to see after the Black Death, you're going to see so few people able to work the fields that they're going to see massive pay increases because they're going to run out of peasants because some of them are going to die. Call it a labor shortage. And of course, it's going to spread up to England. You're going to have the birth of Oxford, and so a lot of these universities kind of started out as like hotels or like boarding rooms. And so you would have the students all live like in this kind of like hotel place, and it might have kind of like an inn, and and the professor would have an inn room. They would all meet downstairs, and the professor would lecture there. And after they were able to pass their examinations, they could get their bachelor's degree. And if they decided to go on further from there, they could get a master's degree. Doctoral degrees, like PhDs, were super rare, and they're going to come up later. They're going to start off as like philosophy, and then like theology, and eventually it'll branch out to history and some of the arts and stuff like that. But they were so super rare. And the only people who had them were really the people who were in charge of universities. Because just didn't have much of a point. In fact, university professors and teachers are going to be extremely poor. The better educated you were in England correlated with poverty. So there's multiple instances where the kings of England had to actually issue licenses to beg for like university professors because they didn't have enough money to eat. So it was kind of an easy job, but it certainly didn't pay well. They were like living off of the donations of their students. But when you think about how schools started out in America, that's how schools in America started out. Small town, like, some farmers would get together and they'd say, hey, we need a teacher. So they might put out an advertisement in the newspaper in the city that their town needs a teacher. The teacher comes in and they'll pitch in to help build a schoolhouse and give the teacher some food and a little bit of money every now and again. They're basically just kind of working to eat. So it's not that abnormal when you think about it. but yeah, this is going to branch out. It's going to be rather successful. And of course, due to some internal conflicts, they're going to split off and make other universities, like they mentioned, Cambridge. And of course, we'll talk about like Edinburgh later on. We'll talk about the Enlightenment, stuff like that, the movement to Scotland. So yeah, it's going to move all throughout Europe. And as more people become more educated in Europe, at first, a lot of the education is going to be copy and pasting a lot of the biases and the mistakes of the Greeks, but also a lot of their wisdom. So a lot of the mistakes were things that had to do with like anatomy, right? So they're going to make some major mistakes with anatomy. They're going to follow astrology to the letter and make a lot of mistakes believing that astrology can actually come up with scientific answers to things. And I can't do that. And a lot of it's going to have to do with some very superstitious stuff too. So, but eventually you'll start getting where people start following and looking for empirical evidence, as we'll see later on, and you'll have the birth of scientific method. And that's the last slide I got. So, all right. So, education before the university. So, what was it all about? Learning what? Arithmetic. Okay. Well, they did learn some basic literacy. And arithmetic. But what was the purpose? What was the end game of the student? For like, what kind of jobs were they hoping to bag? A what? Doctor? Medical doctor? No way.
Oh, like clergy?
Like what?
Like clergy and priest people?
Yeah, clergy and clerics. Yeah. So for clergy and clerical work, right? So they needed preachers and bureaucrats. So they needed people for both the faith, right? And that was one thing during the time of Charlemagne. A lot of pastors and priests and stuff like that were basically illiterate. They kind of memorized some Latin phrases, and they got the gist of that Jesus guy, but they couldn't like really read about it, right? And so then they're sent off into this like the middle of nowhere as preachers. That's not always the case, but sometimes it happens because education was so hard to get. And so that's going to be one of the reasons why in some areas you're going to have some real superstitious kind of like ideas come up, even though they're nominally Christians, because they're even the people teaching it were illiterate, so they couldn't refer back to the Bible and stuff like that. That just goes to show how bad education was during the time of Charlemagne. Okay, so it's going to go through some changes, and one guy who's going to be known for making those changes was Adelard. Where was Adelard at?
Brittany, Italy, France.
Yeah. So he was a teacher in Paris, which is in France. And what was he known for?
His lectures.
Yeah. Who pulled in massive crowds due to his lectures. And I don't know. I'm one of those people who can enjoy a lecture if it's a topic I like. Like I'll just like listen to it like a podcast, right? And somebody who's really good at giving a lecture in a way you like it on something you like, it's kind of like a treat. I don't know. I think so. But I'm kind of an audio learner. Honestly, I bet there's something that you would like to learn about that you could find somebody who could give a really good lecture about. It doesn't have to be a school topic. It could be like somebody talking about musicians or sports or I don't know, arm wrestling or whatever you're into. So it is a sport. It's actually a very high injury sport too. And apparently they like rip their elbows apart all the time.
They're professional wrestling.
Those guys are kind of freaky looking. I don't get it. Whatever. Hey, all right, Italy. So what was the deal with Italy? So we were talking about, hey, Kelby, what was their big focus in Italy? Like it was about the Lex Legis. They had the Justinian and they had the Canon. Middle Ages, yeah, but I mean, what was the topic? Were they going to medical school there? What were they? They were learning to mostly, huh? Geography? Nah, think about courts.
Law.
Oh, yeah. So in Italy, we had founded great law schools. So we're seeing those people everyone loved, called lawyers getting trained. Everybody loves lawyers. Great law schools based on something we heard about before, the Justinian Code. And canon law. What's canon law? Anybody know? It's church laws, right? It's laws of things like marriage.
Philosophy.
The canon law has to do with things like whether somebody does something as part of a Christian community to stay within their church, right? So like had to do things like marriage laws, loans, like you remember they weren't supposed to have interest. Just like it's just legality stuff. Red rum, like murder. Yeah, but that would actually fall more in the secular lane. So they would say there were some things like theft and murder. They can't all be like, whoa, that's their problem. Have them deal with that. We don't touch that M word. All right. So university model and degrees. So hey Hunter, they said that the university was kind of based on something else we saw in the cities. What was it based on for like moving up? It's based on the what system? Like master apprentice.
Oh, I like the guild system?
Yeah. So it based on the guild system. And so remember they had apprentice, journeyman, master. University was just like that. It was based on the economic system of their day. You know what our schools are based on? You think they're based on the guild system?
Yeah.
Public schools are based on the factory system. They were founded
What's
in
our
order.
school based on?
Well, okay, ours is classical model, but I mean like the way that modern schools are set up, modern school method was actually founded by people who are trying to make factory workers. That's why you have bell schedules. That's why you're categorized based upon like age models and stuff like that. Like the whole thing, you had that's why the subjects were divided the way they are. Huh? Yeah. Because we're trying to get you used to be. Of course, there's not that many factory workers in America anymore, but that's really what it's based on. Guild system. And what was the purpose of a degree? Was really what did it come down to? So you could be a
master.
yeah, but what could you do with that degree? Mostly, it was just yeah. Degrees showed that, like some of them, like medicine, yeah, you can now work in medicine. You could work or teach. A lot of it was just to pump out teachers. A subject. In fact, like Texas, for example, some of our first higher education institutions were basically just teacher schools. So, it's just a place where like young ladies in particular could go for a couple of years and learn how to teach after they kind of, I guess we'd say finish their version of high school. So, all right, last one. So, the faculties. Jonathan, what were the faculties? It's like, it was the very, like, classical stuff.
Oh, weren't they studies in the universities?
Yeah. So, these were the subjects taught. And, like, give me an example.
Arts, literature, law,
Yeah.
geometry.
Art, law, geometry. Like, see, here's the thing. Like, a lot of it's very Greek based, like geometry, super important to the Greeks. And geometry was the math that was used to also explain anatomy, astrology, which was super important to them. Later on, you would have alchemy. So like at Cambridge, they would teach degrees in alchemy, trying to get you to do a little transmutation, which never worked, by the way. So don't try alchemy unless you're just going to watch something not work.
I want something explode.
Well, that's what we call chemistry.
This is a form of alchemy.
Yes.
I wouldn't say so.
Explosion's good.
Well, the thing is, alchemy is weird. Alchemy doesn't really have anything to do with mixing chemicals. Alchemy is more just it's almost like trying to make something that's a bogus philosophical principle meet material principles. I don't know work out that way. So
You make a fancy concoction, made a bunch of rings and stuff, and then you say, hey, this is the key to immortality. You sell it and then you make lots of money.
well, when we get to exploration, actually, the hunt for the Philosopher's Stone was one of the reasons why Elizabeth sent explorers to America when she was queen, because she was an alchemist. A lot of people have wasted their entire family inheritance trying to figure out that thing, and it never worked.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know.
Oh, yeah, I finished that.
Oh yeah. Hey folks, that's going to do it for our lecture today. We're going to get back on the next chapter tomorrow. See you later.